It looks like we are almost live. Yes, we are. Let me just share the video link with our community and then we can get started. Okay, there we go. Welcome to the 15th edition of the Triall Community AMA. My name is Rimmel van der Waal. I'm Head of Strategic Partnerships at Triall, and I'm joined here today by our Chief Executive, Adil Espai, our Chief Technology Officer, Niels Klom, and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Arno Bisschop.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
So we'd like to thank all of the community members who took the time to submit questions using our Q&A portal. The quality of the questions just seems to be getting better and better with every session. So that's great to see. And we're excited to see to get you up to speed on all key aspects of our products and technology, our business development and marketing strategies and more. So let's dive right in. As community knows, Joost and I spent some time in Boston last week at the DIA conference. So I'm going to kick off with a question related to the conference, as we got multiple questions on this topic. What were the main takeaways or lessons learned from Triall's experience at DIA 2023? And how will they shape Triall's future strategies in the blockchain and clinical research space? Well, for those that don't know, DIA is one of the largest biopharma conferences, and its primary focus is on the exchange of know-how between both the industry and the regulators. So that includes pharma companies, medical device companies, but also software vendors such as Triall. Well, there was a lot of talks about the future role of AI, if you can imagine. So a lot of debates on how can we make AI fit for purpose within the clinical research domain. Well, of course, the success of any type of AI starts with the quality of data. So how do we get access to this data? And as an ex-FDA commissioner noted, we really need to have the proper incentives to make it worthwhile for industry, academia, care providers, and patients to share their data. And we also have to build the infrastructure to make this possible. And that's exactly what we're trying to realize with our Clinical Insights Exchange. So our product vision and our technology roadmap really fits very closely with a lot of the topics discussed at DIA. And I think that provides a great bridge to the next couple of questions. In our last AMA, we talked a lot about the Clinical Insights Exchange, but there's still a lot to tell about this product and a lot of topics that we didn't really cover in detail yet. So I'm going to start off with a first question, handing that over to Adil. How does the partnership with Crucial Data Solutions contribute to Triall's goal of accessing historical clinical trial data from eClinical systems? And what benefits does it bring to the Clinical Insights Exchange platform?
Thanks, Ray. So CDS has collectively served, I think, over 8,000 studies by now. And at any given moment in time, they host, I believe, around 300 studies. So within what the CDS team has built is obviously a wide network of sponsors who, of course, already trust CDS with their data. And also that data is already stored in the eClinical cloud. So that data is already available. What we aim to do together with our friends at CDS is really connect this data with our Clinical Insights Exchange, abbreviated as CIX or 6 short. And we aim to do that in a federated way, meaning that the data remains in the eClinical cloud. This allows us to then build quickly critical mass as we use CDS as a platform for onboarding so-called data providers.
Thanks, Adil. And I think a hallmark really here is the federated and decentralized approach. So the data remains within the eClinical cloud of Crucial Data Solutions and other eClinical vendors that will integrate with the Clinical Insights Exchange in the future. And that is one way to enable trust and also enable analytics over aggregated data from multiple clinical trials. So I have a question which is also related to trust. And I'm going to hand this one over to Niels. How does the SSI wallet developed by Triall and Sverion provide fine-grained and self-sovereign control over data assets and access permissions for clinical trial sponsors and patients using the Clinical Insights Exchange platform? So without going too much into detail on SSI as a concept, which we have already done in previous AMAs, would you briefly explain how this would work, Niels?
Yeah, sure. In the wallet, of course, you can hold the so-called verifiable credentials, as explained already indeed in multiple AMAs. But what's important to note is that those verifiable credentials are certain attributes and claims about your identity. And you have to see identity as a broad concept. So it's not only, for instance, my name, my date of birth, or my email address, for instance, but you can imagine that I have, for instance, a certain role within Triall, namely the CTO of Triall. And historically, of course, certain roles in organizations have certain permissions with IT systems. So what you can do with self-sovereign identity technology is build a identity from multiple sources, including, for instance, the source which could be your employer. So in this case, Triall, for instance. In the Clinical Insights Exchange, everything has an identity. So first of all, the data sets that are available in the Clinical Insights Exchange have a identity. The algorithms have an identity. Any third-party vendors that want to participate have an identity. And of course, any external party, external organization that participates then has employees, so they also have identities. And how this concept works is that you are sort of onboarding those external organizations, for instance, that want to use the Clinical Insight Exchange. So there's sort of like a, how do you call it? I guess a sort of mechanism in which a sort of know your customer check is being done, meaning that you are in control in which parties you would be allowed on the platform, of course. And as soon as they are allowed, that organization then would be in control of defining who their employees are. And then, of course, if they define who their employees are, they have specific roles, and that automatically maps to permissions in the system. You have a quite natural process of assigning permissions because it's all role based on the actual role you have within an organization, which then also means, of course, that you are quite easy with this technology to do, for instance, substitutions if someone goes on holiday or is on sick leave for a long time, for instance. Well, this whole concept is, of course, not only for employees, but that's also translates to which data sets to access, which, for instance, which computer data executions are allowed, so which algorithms are allowed on which data sets, and then who's able to access those data sets. So we have a quite fine-grained method of ensuring that the right persons have the right access. And all of that is then backed, of course, by the digital signatures of all the different parties involved, which makes it a really nice and clean and also responsible approach. And with that, I mean that, first of all, you have the onboarding of the organization for which you, as for instance, Triall or another organization are responsible, but then you basically bring the responsibility to those organizations and ensuring that they are assigning the correct employees.
Thank you, Niels. Yeah, so indeed, it really thrives in its granularity and the possibility for stakeholders to give each other very granular access permissions in certain scenarios according to certain conditions. And when you start thinking about making data available to a federated and decentralized environment, those are, of course, key. I'm going to jump on to the next question. And I'm also going to hand this one over to you, Niels. How has the collaboration with the Dutch Blockchain Coalition enhance Triall's efforts in building the clinical insights exchange?
Yeah, there's multiple aspects to it. Well, first of all, I would like to highlight, which is not entirely an answer to the question maybe, but of course, the Dutch Blockchain Coalition is, as the name already implies, a coalition of organizations in the blockchain space, which then not only means that you have organizations that are part of it, which are like-minded and working on blockchain technology, but of course also access to certain external organizations.
Looks like we lost news there for a second.
Help in making connections, not only with like-minded organizations, but also with external parties. I hope you can hear me correctly because my internet is shaky. But to answer the question, the Dutch Blockchain Coalition last, well, roughly a year, also sort of raised the bar on the technologies that Triall is working on. So there's an awful lot of work being done also in the Dutch Blockchain Coalition on making sure that different vendors are becoming interoperable with each other. That, for instance, is what is called right now the Dutch Decentralized Identity Profile. That name will change, to be clear, because there's also international interest in that profile. And that's sort of like a stepping stone towards what is known in Europe as the Architecture Reference Framework. And the Architecture Reference Framework is sort of the framework which is being created right now for decentralized identity technology as part of the European Identity Wallet. And that sounds like there will be one wallet. To be clear, there will be multiple wallets for different member states in which you can hold your identity data. So you can expect that, for instance, the Spherion and Triall wallet would also be one of those wallets in the future. The whole problem, though, is that there's not an awful lot of companies that are really well versed in this technology yet. So a lot of things are still unclear about this architecture reference framework. So in the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, we said, okay, let's take a few parties. So we have, for instance, Animo, who's also a SSI vendor in there. We have TNO, which is a well-known research organization, for instance, in the Netherlands, and the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, who are participating in making sure that we come up with a minimal profile so that we can also get external parties on board and external parties interested in using this technology without having to implement everything which is envisioned yet for the architecture reference framework. So actually, after this question, I really have to go because there is a physical meetup about this decentralized identity profile also today, which I'm of course presenting there as well. But I think the Dutch Blockchain Coalition helped us in making sure that there's the connections, helping sure, of course, also from the technical perspective, and then helping in making sure that we have a shared vision of interoperability. So key factors, if you ask me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much joining us in this digital session, and good luck with your physical meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will continue without news, and I'm going to move to the next question. Question for Hadil. So given that more than 60,000 clinical trials are initiated each year, what specific infrastructure and incentives need to be in place to ensure the widespread sharing and reuse of collected data beyond a single study?
Well, this is a very good question, maybe one of the best questions that has ever been asked to me, at least. It's not an easy answer, so I'll try to break it down, I guess, in line like 3 sections, and hopefully, you know, at the end, try to round up. So I think we would need to look at the sponsor infrastructure, sponsor incentives, but also patient infrastructure and patient incentives, right? So starting with the first one, the sponsor infrastructure, they really require a secure and trusted environment for exchanging clinical trial data and insights. I think that's quite obvious because we're dealing with health record or very sensitive information. We want to make sure that that's handled very, very carefully according to the highest standards. And I think, as explained before in previous MMAs and also in our outreach, we as Triall, we aim to provide a federated or decentralized means where the data doesn't really need to be moved across organizational boundaries, but rather stays within the so-called secure eClinical cloud environment. And this is really where our SSI wallet comes to play, as it ensures, and I think Niels also referred to that in his answer, really ensures a fine-grained control over how data is being shared, but also with whom and also under what conditions. If you look at the incentives for the sponsor, it's really evident from the, well, I would say, huge amount of activity that pharma companies are investing in, and also other mind-like initiatives that are all looking at ways to so-called repurpose their clinical trial data, as well as to return data to individual participants. Why? Because they feel that returning the outcome of a study to an actual participant, will help in the engagement of those participants. So, but also in compliance and in retention throughout study, which is a very, very important driver for success of a clinical trial. We see that our exchange, or our 6, addresses both these angles through providing a platform for clinical trial data reuse, and also a platform where data can be shared. And that shared ownership can then be very granularly defined between the sponsor and the patient. So this brings me to the patient. And let me talk about the patient infrastructure first. So SSI Wallet will be used to engage and reimburse patients. As you can understand, within a clinical trial, we're asking a lot from patients. And according to all kinds of regulations and rules, we're only able to reimburse patients for their time. We cannot pay them to become part of a clinical trial. For healthy volunteers, this is a different story, but maybe that's for another time. So our SSI wallet offers a means also to collect consent for specific data, but also helps us to really identify and ring-fence certain permissions, right? Again, as well as a way to reimburse these patients for each time the data is being repurposed. So for the first time, we can really speak about reusing existing data from patients and also reward them for that. In this case, the trial token, TRL, will play a key role, whereby we can enable automatic reimbursement of each time the patient's data set is involved in a data transaction on the exchange.
Thanks, Adil. Thank you for this well-rounded answer. I think you covered on a lot of important topics, both on the sponsor and the patient side, and of course also the role of our utility token TRL. I propose we switch gears for a second and address 2 more questions really related to our roadmap and timelines. So I can imagine the community really wants to know, where is Triall heading and what can we expect for the next 6 months? We just entered the 3rd quarter of this year, and I have a question related to that. So as we are in Q3 and the 2nd half of the year, can you share with us progress made by Triall so far in terms of development and the adoption of the Clinical Insights Exchange and decentralized clinical trials? What would you say has been your biggest achievement since 2023? And how can the community contribute towards your success story in the 2nd half of the year? Well, we're currently finalizing the first prototype of the Clinical Insights Exchange, which is likely to be finished by the end of this month. And that would really be our biggest milestone for this year yet. It builds on 5 years of R&D by our team and partners. And when focusing on the remainder of the year, our core focus is really on building the first commercial version of Clinical Insights Exchange, as well as onboarding future customers. And the community can really support us here with promoting Clinical Insights Exchange and our vision for clinical research, which really, as Adil perfectly addressed, revolves around enabling data reuse and reimbursing patients each time their data is used for secondary research purposes. Well, that brings me to the last question. which is the Clinical Insights Exchange could be a game changer in the field. When will this go live, and will the platform be accessible for trial holders or potential clients? Arno.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Well, I think it adds to your answer. We are looking to launch a first version in the first quarter of next year, so that's within a year, 3/4 of a year. We are now working very hard to engage all contributors that we think that could be helpful, useful, strategic partners to our SIX platform. And our aim here is to really line up several customers already during the next couple of months. And these customers will mostly be sponsors, so pharma companies or CROs, we believe. But yeah, obviously exciting times to move forward to that specific launch, hopefully beginning of next year.
Absolutely. And we will make sure that the community is informed of all key steps and milestones and achievements that we aim to hit over the next couple of months. Adil and Arno, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this session.
Thanks.
And I also like to thank all of the community members who tuned in. We will be back again by the end of this month, so the end of July, with another session. So see you then, and thank you again.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks.